So, hello everybody. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all at this session 1F. Silvina, if we could have the PowerPoint on, so everybody could see. Okay, the topic of this session is secondary resources, international frameworks, and case studies. I will be the chair, I will be the co-chair in this session. My name is Charisios Achillas. I'm an assistant professor at the International Hellenic University at the Department of Supply Chain Management. And I will co-chair this session with Professor Apostolos Giannis from the Technical University of Crete in Chania in Greece. He's very experienced in the topic of this session. In this session, we will have 5 very interesting presentations. I saw the PowerPoint, so they are very promising. So we wait to hear the 5 presenters. Silvina, if we could move on to the next slide, just to say a few things about how this session is organized. We will have the 5 presentations. 5-minute presentation, so I would suggest all speakers, all presenters to keep the time, to be sharp and finish their presentation in 5 minutes, so as to leave some time for discussion at the end of the session. There is also, so give me 1 second. Okay, there is also a voting procedure for the, if you go to the website of the World Resources Forum, you will see that, as you see in the bottom right side of the slide, there is a poll. So you can vote there, the presenter, the best presenter, and the most interesting research that is presented in this session. We will have a slide after the presentations with the IDs, so you can leave it for before the end of the session. I know that time flies, time is very limited, so I will give the floor to the first presenter, so we could move on to the next slide. The first presentation will be delivered by Professor Sonia Valdivia. The topic is ISO 59014, the standard for secondary materials. Professor Valdivia is the scientific director at the World Resources Forum, so she's hosting actually the event today. She's a professor at the Ljubljana University of Lüneburg and convener of the ISO on secondary materials, principles, sustainability and traceability requirements. So, Sonia, the floor is yours. You could, I think you wanted to control the slides, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
okay.
you.
So we give some seconds in order for Sonia to take the control. Okay.
It works very well. Thank you very much for the introduction. And today I want to introduce to you in a short time the main highlights and elements of this new standard for secondary materials that we are developing under the ISO community, the ISO umbrella. I would like to highlight that the World Resources Forum is convener of this standard together with BEM Recycling from Mauritius. So we are 2 conveners organizing, coordinating this effort, international effort. And very important is to understand, or to also to mention that this is a standard that's being developed under the Technical Committee on Circular Economy. This is a relative young, new kid on the block, we could say, a committee, because compared to the ISO TC 207 on environmental management, they are a few years old, and they are developing the standards as mentioned here in this slide. The previous one, please. I didn't. That is, for example, on the framework. The 59004, then you have the standard on business models, that is the next one, 59010, and the next one on measuring circularity. I am not clicking, but In this way, we are part of this family that is developing by, let's say, 2022, about 6 standards, and one of them is exactly the one I'm going to present today. And this part is very important because this is like the Bible for us. This is a scope agreed by more than 20 organizations, 20 countries worldwide on what the scope of the standard should be. And what I would like to highlight here is that it's about developing requirements for processes that lead us to producing sustainable secondary materials. But very important is also that we will address both formal and informal sectors with the aim to facilitate a transition from informal to formal operations. This is very innovative when you talk in ISO about these topics. We have to follow the life cycle thinking principle, like the circular economy principles as well. So these are the main elements of this standard to be highlighted. And as mentioned, if we talk about informal sector, we are really addressing about 90% of the economic actors in the value chain of secondary materials, especially in developing countries, where these are very much concerned. In this slide, I would like to highlight also what we agreed, that is the processes within the scope. It's very interesting because there we managed to define that we will start in the collection phase, then going through the classification. Then we talk about recoverable resources. This is extremely important because this is about changing mindsets and not seeing waste as something that has not value, but as something that has value to other holders, and therefore we name them recoverable resources. As you see, also we introduced 2 new definitions: non-destructive process and destructive processes. They are different. Why? Because we aim actually at having non-destructive processes in order to allow the maximum of reusability, recoverability, for increasing the circularity of the materials. We agreed on 14 principles. Again, this is work in progress. There are revisions, so we will probably come up with a shorter version. But what I would like to highlight are the 3 areas of the principles: the social area, the environmental and the circular economy area. The social area includes the ethical behavior, going through responsible sourcing, which is one of the key topics of the conference, and extended social responsibility vis-a-vis the subsistence activities, meaning this micro units working on waste management in order to ensure proper collection of recoverable resources. And with this, I would like to invite you to follow the work of the TC 323. We have our next working session in 2 weeks' time. But our whole process will end until 2024, early 2024. By then, we should have the standard available. If you are interested in joining, please go through your mirror committees in your countries, your national standardization bodies, and in these ways, we're very happy to welcome views of experts from the companies, from the private sector, but also from governments and from countries affected or interested in advancing this topic. I think with this, I exhausted my time. Thank you very much. And any questions at the end of the presentations, please.
Thank you, Sonia. I was pretty sure that you will keep the time because you set the rules. So we discussed this a lot, that it is very, very critical to keep the time. So I didn't mention in the beginning that the discussion session will come up at the end of after the presentation, so you can use the Q&A session in the Zoom to post your questions for the speakers, or you can also use the chat for any questions to the panelists, and also to post your names, institutions, affiliation, and contact details if you want. So, Apostolos, if you would like to present the next speaker.
All right, thank you, Charis, and thanks, Sonia, for keeping the time. Now we move into our second speaker, that is a researcher from VTT from Finland. Her name is Malin Ridenhausen. So I hope that I didn't destroy your name, sorry. And the topic that will be presented is about the European policy framework for recycling of plastics from ELV, WEEE, and CDW. All right, the floor is yours, Malin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Malin Ridenhausen, and today I will briefly present some key findings from the Horizon 2020 project NonTox. Next slide, please. Increasing recycling rates and a well-functioning market for secondary raw materials are crucial for the implementation of a circular economy, which is also highlighted in the EU's circular economy policies. The NonTox project aims to increase the recycling rates of plastic waste containing hazardous and undesired substances, with a focus especially on the brominated flame retardants. We do this by developing and optimizing recycling processes to produce safe and high quality secondary plastic materials. The NonTox project targets plastic waste coming from waste electronic and electrical equipment, construction demolition waste, and end-of-life vehicles. Next slide, please. When developing recycling technologies, it's important to also understand the limits set by the operational environment. In NonTox, we have drawn the policy framework across the circular value chain in order to create a good overview of the policy drivers for recycling. In this study, we have highlighted that the legislative framework on waste aims at increasing recycling rates, while the legislative framework on chemicals and products aims at preventing the use of harmful and potentially harmful substances. But when dealing with a waste containing hazardous substances, and when aiming towards recycling this waste, this is creating some barriers for recycling. Next slide, please. So when looking at recycling, it cannot be seen as waste management process alone. It's also the production of secondary raw materials, for which there need to be a market uptake to ensure closing the loop. In order to move the materials from the waste section to the secondary raw materials section through the recycling process, the product needs to answer to the demands of the chemicals and product legislation. So the product needs to be safe and it needs to be clean. In addition to this, the product also needs to answer to the quality demand of the industry. There needs to be the market uptake. But still, some waste streams are prevented from ever reaching the recycling process, regardless of the potential quality of the recyclate. This is mainly when the waste is hazardous. The legislative framework states which treatment processes are suitable for hazardous waste, basically outruling most recycling activities. Here, the focus is on the feedstock and not on the product. But as technology solutions are developing, we can start seeing high TRL levels for technologies that are able to remove the hazardous substances and produce a clean and safe recyclate from a hazardous waste. So my suggestion on how to remove this barrier is to shift the focus of the legislation from the feedstock and more towards the product. What comes for other actions to promote the recycling of plastics? A group of 5 Horizon 2020 Circular Plastics project have joined forces in a policy recommendation for a circular approach to recycling plastics. Among others, we highlight that there is no EU-wide end-of-waste criteria today for plastics to determine when the waste becomes a secondary raw material per definition. Today, a product that is accepted in one member state may not be allowed into another EU member state, and this hampers the EU-wide trade of recyclates. We also highlight that there is a need to increase the knowledge about the benefits of using recyclates. Lack of knowledge, combined with strict requirements on the demand side, prevents the extensive use of recyclate today. Without detailing all of the recommendations within the time limit today, we finally also point out that a steady supply and a harmonized quality of recyclates will contribute to a well-functioning market of secondary plastics in the future. Next slide, please. Which is then the end of my presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Malin, and thanks for keeping the time. I will pass the floor to Charis so he can chair the next presenter.
Thank you, Apostolos. Okay, so the next presentation will be delivered by Lúcia Helena Xavier. The topic of the presentation is analysis of the trade-off between the resource recovery from e-waste and the reuse potential. Lúcia is a senior researcher in environmental management, reverse logistics, and urban mining. She has coordinated national and international researches on e-waste and reversal logistics. I think we had the technical problem with the present with Lúcia as a presenter, but I think we have fixed this, right? Lúcia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Good morning, good evening. Thank you so much. Just in time. And then today I will present the study. It's a brief presentation about the trade-off between the recovery of resources and the reuse potential of e-waste. As much as in circular economy, the solutions are not uniform, so we will have to consider both the country, the energy metrics, and the materials and the products we are talking about. So me and Leonardo are presenting these main findings of these previous results. The next, please. Here we are providing a first approach where we are moving from sustainability to the circular economy, where in circular economy we are providing the reuse solutions and as much as the recycling points. And then we are talking about the circularity as much as the points considered in the circular economy principles. And also we are talking about regulation and about some other indicators that we are considering in the next slides. Here, I would like to mention about the environmental impact mitigation, secondary materials recovery as the main streams we are regarding here. Please, the next. Next, please. The objective of this study was to consider the potential of specific waste categories. As much in Brazil, we are considering this year a list of 215 categories, types of e-waste, and some of them are categorized in 8 different types, and the potential material recovery and the scenarios for extending this useful life. The average useful life we are considering in our study, it's about 7.3 years for the average 8 categories we are regarding on. And our methodology here for this specific study, we consider 3 indicators: the GDP, energy consumption, regarding the hydropower metrics in Brazil, and also CO2 emissions. The idea here was to consider both the potential of material recovery, but also the challenge of logistics moving. This was previously regarded by many authors when they considered the paradox, what they named the paradox of reverse logistics. When we have extra routes to recover material and products, and then we have fossil fuel consumption and CO2 emissions from these extra routes. This is the case. In a country large as Brazil, we have extra routes and in some cases not so efficient models, transport models. So we are regarding these challenges as some streams to consider in which limit it would be important, or as I can say, necessary to introduce some solutions for transport efficiency and sustainability. Next, please. Here is a two scenarios approach that we proposed. Previously, from 2014, we considered the patterns of CO2 emissions that, as much as we introduced transport routes that were not consumption fossil fuels, so the pattern of CO2 emissions were higher in this period until up to 2014. When we are thinking the next 5 years, 2015 to 2020, we had a different approach, as much as we had some investments on sustainable energy metrics. So the CO2 emissions reduced about 4%. But this year we are experiencing energy supply shortage according to the hydropower metrics. So we are moving to thermoelectric power. This is the case that the CO2 emission that can increase in the next years. And another data here, important data here, is about the e-waste consumption in the pandemic scenario that worldwide was settled in 11% increasing. So it can lead from 2020 to a huge energy consumption. If we're talking about technological improvement of electronic equipment, we can think about more equipment on use, but we can consider an energy efficient on it. But if you are thinking about obsolete and old equipments, they are not energy efficient. So this is the slide that provides you some information about the trade-off that we're regarding. This is the scenario for Brazil, but we are considering in the next studies for another countries also. Next, please. So this is the conclusion here, 3 main conclusions. The first one is that the transport sector can be the main challenge for the sustainability for circular economy, as much as for reverse logistics systems. If they are not sustainable enough, they can impact negatively according to the fuel that are used on it and the respective emissions. The second conclusion was about the circularity analysis that could be in a broader way regarding purchasing power, the criticality of materials, and also the economic policies that we are concerned on. And the third conclusion, briefly here, it's about the legal requirements aligned with the circular economic principles that it's not the reality for many countries yet. Next, please. Thank you so much. This is our short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia, for your presentation and also for keeping the time. So I move the floor to the microphone to Apostolos for the next presentation. You are muted, Apostolos.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Okay, I'm waiting for the slides. So.
Yes, Gustavo, you will take control and you will share your screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we are waiting for the slides.
Okay, okay, I cannot share yet.
Okay, take some time. Okay, now we see.
Okay, so our next speaker is Gustavo Pacheco-Partilla, and he will present us about assessing the social impacts of e-waste management in Cuenca, Ecuador. Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me here. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Ecuador. So, well, we are past the time to start seeing the ways as a strategy for a sustainable value chain, specifically for critical and non-critical raw materials. And despite the growing attention and innovation around this circular economy practice, it is still widely performed under suboptimal conditions within informal schemes, especially in low and middle income economies. And this practice involves social impacts over specifically vulnerable groups that engage in these activities. And so assessing the social impacts of these practices are remarkably challenging. So then comes the question, how should we assess the social activity, the social impacts of these activities, especially when it comes to e-waste management? So here I think we have to go a step back to review from previous experiences that can shed some light on how we could proceed with the waste management assessments. And learning from these experiences is key, since they allow us for identifying what can be adjusted, adapted, improved, for example, in terms of social life cycle assessments. Our previous experience while road testing the new SLCA guidelines through assessing the informal recycling system of Cuenca in Ecuador showed different aspects that could be refined for assessing, in this case, e-waste management in this specific city through a specific project we are running right now. So keep in mind that SLCA is under constant evolution, especially when aiming at assessing contexts where vulnerability and informality are the norm and not the exception. So different aspects, such as scope and uniformity of elements, such as inventory indicators or the broadness of subcategories, are yet to be addressed. And considering this situation is actually beneficial for further studies such as the one that we are about to present. So, but what is the rescue project we are talking about here? Well, rescue is an international project we are running right now, which stands for Responsible and Sustainable E-Waste Management in Cuenca, Ecuador. It is funded by the REPIT platform and executed by the University of Cuenca and by EMAC-EP, which is the municipal waste management company here in Cuenca, and with the collaboration from entities such as EMPA, ETH Zurich, and EcoPartner. The objective of this project is to implement and design a sustainable e-waste management system for the city, considering circular economy principles for retention, for value retention. But how can we integrate the SLCA methodology for assessing this project? In this case, we focus on 4 main topics that we consider critical. So the first one is actually a combination of two steps. Well, when we consider the stakeholder and subcategory selection, in this case, we consider this methodological proposal goes by considering all the stakeholders involved within the value chain, and covering the operational and business model that this project has. And we have to keep in mind that this project is an applied research project where it is possible to incorporate the newest findings on available literature and experiences, different experiences regarding e-waste management. The second one, which I think is one of the most important ones, is that from our experience working with social life cycle assessment, is that we experienced that there are different risks when using generic data for performing, for example, social risk assessments. And so the risk of these generic data specifically for informal settings present a distorted reality that is far from the real situation. Since this project is also focusing on inclusive recycling, we expect this information to be as real as possible. So we rely on primary information. So, and we also need some other type of data, but And in this case, we expect to continue to develop our research on, for example, different new techniques, such as web scraping, that could provide some updated information on different aspects without needing to go to collecting information from primary sources that oftentimes could be time and resource consuming. But at core, we expect that the inventory indicators generated in this project make it beyond reports and articles. So we expect them to be replicable and usable for replicability. And for example, comparative assessments. And the ultimate goal would be to make these indicators available through existing LCA databases. For example, here in Ecuador, we have the newly created Ecuadorian Life Cycle Assessment database that could be so beneficial to have the social information there. And what about the results? Well, results have to be suitable for decision and policymakers and other stakeholders. But we have a strong focus on communication because LCA data is not readable or it's not friendly for non-SLCA experts. So we have to put tons of effort in making these results friendly for other stakeholders involved. So for example, through these interactive dashboards that could simplify the process of understanding the process and the outcomes of the evaluations. So this could be really helpful for people to understand and to decide upon the results of an SLCA study. And this is the approach we will implement within the rescue project in Cuenca, Ecuador. This was my short presentation, and thank you very much. I will be happy to address any question if you have one.
Thank you, Gustavo. We're gonna have the discussion session at the end after all the presentations have finished. Someone raised the hand, but please keep your question, or you can write your question into the chat session so we can take this when the times arrive. Thanks again, Gustavo. I will pass the floor now to Charis to continue the sessions. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And we have last but not least, Veronica Di Bella. The topic of the presentation is the business case for e-waste management in Kenya, a case study from the off-grid solar sector. Dr. Veronica Di Bella is a manager in the Environmental, Social and Governance Impact Team at CDC Group, the UK Development Finance Institution, and the lead on circular economy. Veronica has long experience in the waste and environmental sector, and her work has covered about 20 countries across the world. So, Veronica, the floor is yours. I don't know if you will take control or will it be handled by Silvina? Okay.
I should be able to take control.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not yet. Hello, everyone. I'm Veronica, and I'm going to present this case study from the off-grid solar sector, which was funded by CDC Group and conducted in collaboration with SOFIs. The objective of the study was to develop and run schemes for the collection and recycling of e-waste, and also to assess their sustainability from an economic, but also environmental and social perspective. The study focused on two key areas. One was about understanding the fate of out-of-warranty products, but also incentivizing consumers on how to take back these products. And the second phase was properly a pilot on the collection and recycling. As part of the first stage, we conducted a survey, which was the first one of its type conducted in rural Africa, which analyzed the types of e-waste that the customers at home, but also the distance of where the customers live from shops of one of CDC's investees in the off-grid solar sector, which is called Encopa Solar. As you can see from the map on the left, some of the people lived about 25 kilometers from their closest shop. So that's something that brought to a lot of consequences in our study. Another part of the survey looked at what people were currently doing with the e-waste that they had at home, and in particular, which disposal practices they were looking at. In terms of disposal practices, it was clear from our study that most people were going to burn the e-waste they had at home after having had them in the house and having hibernated them in the house for a long time. Next slide, please. As part of the survey, we also looked at some of the incentives in order to help the customers bring back their waste to the shops. From the survey we conducted, it was clear that having free products, even small products, was going to be the most appealing of the incentives we identified, together with having a discount on new products. Next slide, please. After that, we piloted the incentives in Western Kenya across 8 different shops. 4 of the shops provided only awareness to the customers, whereas 4 of the shops provided both awareness and incentives. The pilot ran for 16 weeks, and the Encopa team tried and contacted more than 5,000 of their previous customers. Out of these, they could only reach 2,000 and about 400, and out of these, only 3 customers actually returned their items. This was, of course, not what we were hoping for or expecting, but I think it provided a lot of lessons learned. In particular, we realized that there were difficulties in reaching the customers after their products went out of warranty, because some of them changed mobile phones or simply because they were not happy to be contacted, but also showed us that probably the incentives we put forward were insufficient to attract customers, and they were not commensurate to the travel expenses, which in some cases went up to about $6, which is a lot in rural Kenya. On the positive side, there was certainly an interest in awareness and learning that came up very strongly from the customers. Next slide, please. In terms of the pilot, which was the second phase of the program, we collected about 80 tons of waste across actors from the off-grid solar sector, but also universities, humanitarian sector, and so on. If you could click again, please. The average treatment cost for the items that were collected ranged between about $0.25 and $2 according to the type of waste. And in the next slide, please, we will see the breakdown of these waste, which was conducted by 2 recyclers of e-waste in Kenya, Waste Center and EnviroServe, that collaborated with us. If we can move to the next slide. In addition to these, I thought it was important to highlight some of the other impacts that the project achieved. First of all, we built the capacity of local recyclers, and we also supported them during a difficult time during COVID. We raised the awareness among the local communities in rural Kenya, but we also realized how important knowing more about health and environment is for the rural communities that we interviewed. We paved the way for a producer responsibility organization, which is now being implemented by the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association. And we've also seen that other programs are conducting studies similar to the one that we started. And during a workshop we organized in July, we also shared the findings with about 90 actors. Next slide, please. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I will take them jointly with Rueda and Federico from Sofis. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica, for the nice presentation and also for keeping the time. So this was the last presentation of the session. So before moving to the discussion session with the panel, maybe we could take a minute in order to vote for the best presentation and for the best presenter and the best research work. Maybe if we could move back one slide, Silvina. Yes, if you go to the portal of the forum, you will see that there is a poll session where you can put your vote. The next slide, you will see the IDs of the presenters and the works. Okay, so if you want to vote for one of the ladies or for Mario, you could use the ID that is shown in this slide. So we would like to give 1 minute for this before moving on to discussion. I don't see any questions so far, so you could also take this 1 minute maybe to post a question if you have any. Okay, so we can move to the discussion. I don't see any question on the Q&A or the chat session. There was a hand raised in one of the previous presentations. I don't know if this has been answered or if this was by mistake. I don't see any hand raised now.
I think,
Okay.
Haris, we can ask, for example,
Lucia has a question, maybe.
Yeah, sorry. I
Yes.
would like to, thank you. I would like to talk with Veronica. I think that all presentations here are worth, but Veronica worked with Magalini, that is one of the references on e-waste. So I would like to ask you, Veronica, about the solar panels, because we have been discussing about it and about the hazardous substance on it. And I am not sure about this. I would like to hear from you about the cadmium and other substances that may be present, and also the difficulty of dismantling the solar panel. People are not concerned on it. And here in Brazil, we work with waste pickers, and also they ask a lot about it. And if you could give me some information about, I would thank you.
Sure, I will start, and then maybe Federico, who is also on the line, can add. So yes, PV panels is definitely something that that we have found among the waste that we have collected, and it's certainly one which is challenging. It was challenging in Kenya, but I know it provides a lot of challenges also in other geographies, like in India. They also, as it was in one of my slides, but it probably went quite quickly, they also contributed to the glass fraction that we found. In terms of cadmium, probably Federico is better placed to answer, so I might pass the word to him.
Yeah, I think we didn't collect a lot of PV panels also because the solar home system and solar portable lantern, the size of the PV panels it's quite small, At the moment, well, currently, most of the panel has been exported by Enviroserv to their Dubai facility, where they are processed in their facility over there. But it's definitely true. It's an increasing issue. In parallel, we were running a pilot, and I think there is in the other session our colleagues from Dipali, which is presenting some of the results of the pilot we are running in India. We're working with local entrepreneur, Poseidon. The company is called Poseidon. We set up the first recycling infrastructure for recycling the panel in India through mechanical processes. And that's also something that is pretty much needed. I know in Africa there are few companies that are recycling PV panels, one in South Africa, but definitely we need more. We need also to keep in mind, to put things into perspective, that across all Europe, we are probably now collecting and treating around 100, 200 tons of PV panels. So it's still quite a new waste stream. And most of the PV panels collected nowadays in Europe are going to crushing processes and then following a little bit more the glass route. So it's not yet probably the time where we see a lot of focus on the recovery of even heavy metals or even critical raw materials, because now the modern panels with thin films, they also use a lot of critical materials. So I think we need to put PV panels recycling in the perspective of 5 to 10 years or even more. But definitely something to keep on our radar.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I have also one question for these speakers. Do you think the PV panels business, the recycling business in Kenya, will be viable in the future?
So that was one of the key findings. So we work with two of the main e-waste recyclers. So we didn't work with the informal sector, just for clarity. And so it's clear that there will be the need for additional funding for these facilities. The legislation in Kenya is changing, so it's also likely that some of the producers will be asked to pay for some of the product that they generate, so that provide a stream of income. But certainly there is the need for additional funding. I think another issue that we have seen is that so far the quantity of waste that the e-waste recycler receive is not constant throughout the year, and so we had like spikes and lows. Whereas during our program, the fact that we managed to provide them with a constant amount for a few months made a big difference. We hope that through this producer responsibility organization that also Google is setting up, this is going to become more kind of streamlined, and this will also guarantee a steady input for the waste recyclers. I don't know if Federico or whether you want to add anything.
No, I think you mentioned the key point. What we know, and it's not a big secret, proper e-waste management means that someone has to pay. And this is particularly true for certain fraction, in particular for lithium-based batteries and other fractions. So definitely that's needed. We saw that when injecting money into the system, so we paying for recycling through the program, the volumes are increasing. We are really happy because during the first few months of the pilot, the volumes really increased. So companies got used to dispose the waste through the formal channel, through recyclers. And even after we stopped the pilot, we ran out of the money, if you like. Some of the company kept using Enviroserv and WEEE Center to dispose their waste. So we managed somehow to create an impact. And that's why we know for sure that the moment legislation will come, definitely we will see an increase in the amount of waste that will be collected and treated by recyclers in Kenya. But I would say this is applicable to any other African countries as well.
Thank you very much, Federico.
Thank you.
Maybe I should raise a question to Mario Gustavo about the rescue project And if you could tell us a few things about the project, the time frame of it, when should we expect documented results, or if they are available already? And if it is possible, if you could also give us a URL with a website where we can find some results from your social LCA studies.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, the project actually started in April this year, and this is a 2-year project. And we expect that we can expand it, because it entails the creation of an entirely new facility here. So we are currently working on identifying actors and planning the actual plans, for example. And this is our first stage, but the social part we expect to be releasing it next year probably. And yes, this is the sorry, I think I have another microphone open. Yeah, I think we expected by next year to have the results of the social assessment. We currently have, well, and are almost published the results of the first SLCA project we have on informal recycling that is expected to be released in December. But regarding the rescue project, it's still ongoing because, as you know, the nature of life cycle assessment is to be iterative. So we have to be identifying actors, what subcategories should go, what subcategories or stakeholders should not come into the assessment. So yes, that's our time frame, as I said, okay. 1 year from now. And for now, we do not have a web page, but if someone would like more information, I can leave my contact in the chat so we can keep in touch.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. We can take one last question. This is raised by Sonia. Sonia, would you like to turn on your microphone, or should I read it?
Yeah, thank you. It was for Malin to Castel-Riedenhausen. It is about the policy framework, a very interesting framework. I'm wondering, because of course, because of the time, you cannot go into detail, but what about the flame retardants that are in the plastics? I know there is legislation around, but how do you see them addressed in the policy framework, please?
They are addressed in the policy framework. There's different depending on which flame retardant that we are talking about. There are several different that are brominated, and a whole bunch that are based on other chemicals. But they are regulated mostly in the waste directives, and then also in REACH. So there is definitely, the regulation is in place what comes to safety and preventing the circulation of these chemicals. But I would say that the problem is more on the circularity side and technology development. So the legislation is based on what type of technologies we have available today and yesterday, but not on the technology availability of tomorrow. And already today we see that technology is developing, and we are very soon, if not already today, we're able to produce safe recyclates from hazardous waste. And today there is somewhat of a hinder of doing that based on the legislation of today in Europe.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
So I guess this is the end of the session. I would like to give a silent applause to all speakers. Unfortunately, we could, I hope sometime we meet in person and we have a very wonderful session live. So Apostolos, if you would like to add anything, or if you would like to close.
Yeah, it was a very interesting session. I think we have learned a lot of things about the management in Africa or even in South America. And there are always room for new things to learn and develop. And I would like also to thank all the speakers. And I hope next time we can meet in person and to the next conference when it will be organized. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairs.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.